Hello again, it is I, Frieza700, and we are back with some Warhammer 40K lore. This time, we are talking about Kharn the Betrayer. That is right, the one man who single-handedly destroyed his own legion. Here we go on the introductions to his legendary tale.
After the
Now, I'm not gonna lie, Kharn, when I first was reading the Horus Heresy books, mostly about Angron and the Warhounds Legion, I actually thought Angron was not a real character. I actually thought he was a figment of the imagination of Angron. I thought he was more or less just a figment of his imagination. But we find out he's actually his own person. And that's what makes Kharn the more interesting factor, is that he actually is a person. He just so happens to be the opposite of Angron in a lot of ways until after the Horus Heresy, where he becomes exactly like Angron in every fucking way. Now, how does Kharn begin? Well, he gets selected, as every other Astartes does, as a child after the Unification Wars, and he gets sent to Bot. And if you remember my Warhounds Legion, that is their home world. That is like their fortress monastery. That is the world that they get to train on. A volcanic, terrible planet that has zero chances of recruiting people because there are no inhabitants. Well, while Kharn is there, he discovers that, well, life isn't this easy. So while he's there, he has a centurion guiding the neophytes on how to fight, how to be a Astartes, how to be a battle brother. But the centurion points out something called the contest. And the contest is something that's rather interesting because the contest is an ancient and well-established tradition of the Legion. Now, the Legion itself is very interesting because the neophytes are just now getting their surgical implants and they're being inducted into this contest. And Kharn and this other initiate, the neophyte next to Kharn asks, well, what's the prize if we stack 1,000 skulls? Well, the centurion doesn't really fucking know. He's more or less never seen anyone reach 1,000 skulls and win. But Kharn says, well, where do we get the skulls from? That's the more important question, straight to the point. Where do we get these skulls? He doesn't care what the reward is. He just cares to win. But the centurion mocked him, and this is the first time we ever see Kharn get humiliated. Now, after his humiliation, where all the Astartes and Battle Brothers laugh, because the skulls come from the neophytes and the other Battle Brothers. So, essentially what happens is in the contest is Astartes versus Astartes. It's always going to be trainee versus trainee. And the goal is to become excellent close quarter combat and hand-to-hand specialist. Well, if your neophyte is severely lacking, then the neophyte who's really good is going to end up killing you, and he will use your skull as part of the contest. That's essentially the way this works. This is why I say that these guys are more or less shock troopers, is because they're really fucking good at being just total berserkers. Now, Kharn, after being humiliated, actually survived his trials and became a full Astartes. Now, he swiftly rose through the ranks, and it's not too sure why he rose through the ranks. At least from my perspective, I can't tell if it's because he was so skilled, or if it's because Angron was killing all of his, more or less, competition. Because as I said in the Angron lore, Angron was a very angry Primarch. He's really emo at this time. He was killing anybody who entered his chambers. Well, Kharn is now the captain, and he's like, alright, time to meet my Primarch. And he goes into the Primarch's room, and immediately is met with an autistic screech and wailed upon by this 7-foot, 8-foot tall monstrosity who's just pummeling the life out of him. Now, this is where it gets rather interesting, is that we see Kharn's personality shine through. This is an intense moment. Kharn is ordered by the Emperor not to fight back. So now he's defenseless and being wailed upon by a god. And this Angron, who is a pissed off motherfucker, is killing everybody who is his predecessors, who are probably more combat experienced than Kharn himself. And yet, Kharn's got to hold out somehow. And he's got to reach out to his Primarch. Now, normally, a lesser man or an Astartes would be buckling under the pressure and swing back, or more or less start running for his life, like every other Astartes did. But not Kharn. Instead, he tries to reason with him. And that's something that's interesting, is that here you got a guy who wants to kill you out of pure emotion. There is no logic drive to it. He's just emotionally fueled to kill your ass. But Kharn's able to dip through the emotion and point out that he's not attacking Angron because he's afraid or because he's a coward like he paints his legionnaires to be. He's not fighting him because he is loyal. He listens to all commands, and all of his battle brothers are just as bloodthirsty as Angron. And this actually stops Angron. And this allows Angron to go, well, shit. I gotta take your word for it. You didn't die like the other Astartes. And this is the first time we see it where someone was actually able to cool Angron down. Because mind you, Angron's not just pissed off because the Emperor just said, fuck you, son. I'm gonna teleport you against your wishes. No. Angron's also pissed because he's had these butcher nails inside his head that literally rewire your brain so you're always angry, no matter what. Or you're in pain unless you kill something. So, really, Angron's fighting you because he wants to go to sleep, not because he hates you. Although that is a big part of the reason. Now, Angron is part of the Legion now, and Kharn becomes his eloquary. He shows him around. And it's in this introductory phase that we see where Kharn is really just a voice of reason for Angron. This is why I theorized when I first read the Horus Heresy books. I theorized that Kharn wasn't a real person. I thought that reality was Angron finally lost his mind and just started creating characters out of nowhere. And yes, you mostly get these novels from an omniscience perspective, but at the same time, sometimes we see the book from Kharn's perspective, and that, in my mind, was us seeing Angron's logic side. But of course, later on in the Horus Heresy, I realized that these are totally separate characters. But still, I would love to see that argument be made that Kharn's really just a logic and reasoning of Angron. Buried beneath the butcher nail enhancement, there is still a Primarch in there. There's still a man beneath this fucking 12-foot-tall hunk of meat. There's still a man who's capable of reasoning, reaching out through his emotion. But that's not the case. Instead, we realize that Kharn's actually his own person who really, he wants to get in touch with his Primarch. It's kind of like a daddy issue. You really want to know your dad, you know? And here he is, he's full of hate, full of pain, and you want to understand where he's been through. This is something that him and the whole Legion want to do. Well, Angron realizes that some of these guys don't want to fight, because, you know, they'll die. That's reasonable. And the Warhounds already have a reputation of starting wars that could have never happened and butchering the whole fucking planet. Well, Angron decides to amplify that. So now he makes it where everyone has to get butcher nails. And Kharn was one of the first people to be lobotomized and given this butcher nail. And this is where we dip into the Horus Heresy lore, where Kharn talks to this lady who, I forgot her name, sorry. But she more or less commands the vessel that Angron's in, and she's the captain. And she asks him a few questions about it, like, why did you get the butcher nail installed? And Kharn goes, well, I did it so I could feel more connected with my Primarch, so I could better understand him and where he comes from. Well, do you understand him now? Did it work? Are you better terms with your Primarch? Sadly, no, I'm not. And that's something that's really deep into Kharn's lore, is that he really went through extremes to butcher his own body, just like his father, but he still doesn't understand him. He still doesn't get it. And this is something that I really applaud Kharn for. This has been a quick introduction into Kharn the Betrayer. Next video, we're going to go into about more or less his war gear and his Horus Heresy lore, what happened during the Horus Heresy. But this has been the introduction, like him as a neophyte, to him as a captain, to my own little theories about him that I used to have. But once I read more of the books, I realized he's not a totally separate character. He's actually his own fucking person. So, besides that, this has been Freezer 700, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm going to live stream some more Magic the Gathering Arena tomorrow, if you guys are going to be on in the morning. So, I guarantee most of you won't be on, but I will be. And then I'll be around later on Thursday afternoon to live stream some more. So, see you guys next time.